Tell me, how has technology evolved in the context of the Smart Wellington program? I mean, where did it all start, and where are you today in relation to technology?
Moving into the Smart Wellington program, we already had a great deal of strength in things like three-dimensional geospatial. Because Wellington is such a hilly city and such a three-dimensional place, we already had some good technical skills to deal with that. Similarly, in the property and rating area, we had real areas of strength. The challenge for us, though, is Council delivers well over 500 different services, and we had the chocolate chip cookie problem. So we had chunks of chocolate where we had very highly developed services, and then we had much more doughy bits where things were not necessarily so evolved. The infusion of technology has been largely to do with how do we reorient Council to begin to meet those different questions. So we form partnerships with different companies. So, for example, we had a partnership with NEC. That allowed us to explore how machine learning could be introduced into the city. It also allowed us to explore things like augmented and virtual reality at a scale we couldn't have done on our own. And what that meant was we could begin to understand how these technologies can be deployed to help people understand.
Well, I guess speaking about technology and data, you can't go too far without having a conversation around talent and skills.
Yes.
How has that gone on in the context of Wellington?
So we're one of the few local governments that has employed a game developer. It's been a case of bringing in new skill sets we didn't have previously, but it's also been a case of upskilling the staff we have. So if you look at the types of skill sets you find in Council, there are important skill sets to do with how you administer the city as a public servant. You have engineering, architecture, planning, pretty much all the big built environment professions represented and practiced. The technology is about how those professions fuse together and engage with each other and with the public so that we can make better decisions. As we develop more and more capabilities in data, it's also a case of evolving our data culture and the skill base of our workers to meet that new ecosystem and those new expectations that are of them.
Does the council or the local government have support programs in place that would allow the skilling up of individuals, particularly around data?
That's an evolving journey, largely because it's a moving target.
Yes.
So we've had mentoring programs for younger staff and for some of the older staff as well. One of the key things has been teaching people when to ask for help. Often people's own judgment is quite good when it comes to issues like privacy. But the key is them knowing when to ask for support so that the privacy officers, innovation officers, etc. can come along and help educate them about how you deal with this particular problem. And one of the great difficulties is when you begin to apply theories, things that weren't in the theory start to come up. So one of the good examples is with the application of privacy to sensing systems. We've effectively had to evolve a system of social license that's geographically based so that we can understand the different constraints on different environments that we deal with. It's not necessarily something we would have anticipated and thought, but it's now something that we have to pass on to the generation that's coming through.
When you talk about smart city, it's not about the smart, but it's about the city.
Yep.
And in that context, how has the Wellington community and society in general embraced the smart city concept?
We have never been very definitive about what a smart city is. For us, smart is how you do things, it's not what you do. So it's not necessarily about having the latest technology or the brightest light. It's about making sure that you've got the technology that puts you in a position to do what we need to do. So in areas like civil defence, it's been a real mark of pride for the city, the ability to respond extremely quickly to events, but also to begin to test how you involve citizens, how do you open information and data in real time. These are things that are traditionally quite difficult to do. The speed we move at is based upon cultural understanding as opposed to technological ability. So, for example, during the Kaikoura earthquakes, we put out maps in real time from our headquarters showing people what the impact on their community was, what roads were open, etc. The difficulty with doing that was none of that was technical. The difficulty was evolving a culture which was digital first and could provision that speed.
How did you go about doing that? And how has that digital first journey evolved?
So the first part of it was to move from a dependency on paper to a dependency on digital. So if you look at the city's journey over time in the earthquake space, after a major earthquake we have about 1,600 buildings to inspect. And those inspections are basically to see if the building is a danger to itself or the areas around it, looking for things like falling glass, cracking masonry, that kind of thing. Originally what would happen is we would divide the city into squares. Each square would be allocated an inspector and they'd go tick off all the buildings. What we've done over time is moved to a digital collection where that form has been digitised into an app. That app is connected directly to our spatial systems. And in effect what happens is as the photographs and the reports are filed by the building inspectors, they appear in real time on the big three-dimensional models of the city, which allow us to begin making decisions and triaging. And most importantly, it shortcuts the journey from there is a problem with this building to this is the issue that these people have. From a city point of view, understanding the damage to the building is important, but more important is understanding what role is that building playing in the city's infrastructure? What role is it playing in the lives of citizens? Are we going to have to divert traffic? Is there a danger to the power grid? Are we going to have to evacuate people and take care of them? Those are the answers we need to get to quickly.
I know there's a fair bit of development also in the context of the digital twin, and I know that's it's early in the piece, but do you want to shed some light on where your thinking is at?
So digital twins are the hottest topic in smart cities. To be fair, we still don't know entirely what one is, but we've been developing the bits of one. The definition we began with was that it was a digital reflection of a physical object. So if you look at the big three-dimensional versions of Wellington we look at where we synthesise all of the sensors and the regulations so we can understand how the city needs to respond and adapt, we originally thought that was a digital twin. But lately we've been moving our thinking to understanding a digital twin more as an object which exists simultaneously in the physical and digital realms together. And so what that means in practice is a place where you can no longer divide the digital impression from that physical object. So if you look at something like the city's street lighting systems, it exists both physically and digitally at the same time. They are virtually indivisible from each other if you actually want them to work.
It's a fantastic segue into the next part of the discussion around the case studies, where we talk about solutions, we talk about engagement, and we talk about the cases in much more detail. So let's head into those sections.